Okay, Andrew.
Thank you. Well, kia ora koutou katoa, ko ana Withington whakaungawa, no ototahi Aotearoa ahau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. That wasn't in English, obviously. That was a little introduction about myself in Te Reo Māori, which is the Indigenous language of New Zealand. So firstly, thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to present a little bit about my culture and folk song tradition from New Zealand. I've been very fortunate that I've been in the States for about 9 months now. Prior to that, I worked at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand and was involved in teacher education and also in music. So my background is I've been a classroom teacher and also taught at tertiary level. So I'm very much looking forward to sharing a few things that I've done in my choirs and in my classroom over the last few years with you tonight. So firstly, I just want to share a little bit about New Zealand. So let me just go back here. I'll just share this again because it's just frozen. Just give me a second here. Start here, share, and I will just bear with me a second. Can you see that so far? Yep.
Yes.
How are we going?
Yep.
Just work out why this is frozen. Okay. Perfect. So that's a map of New Zealand. And I come from a town or a city in the middle of the South Island called Christchurch or Aotearoa. So there are 3 languages in New Zealand. Firstly, it's English, and then Te Reo Māori, which is the Indigenous language of New Zealand, and lastly, New Zealand Sign Language. So New Zealand is sometimes referred to as Aotearoa, which means land of the long white cloud. So if we look back at this slide, the actual shape of New Zealand, a lot of people think is in the shape of a massive cloud. So that's why it's had that name. Firstly, I wanted to start with just finding out a little bit from you as to what you think the origins or the features of New Zealand folk songs are. So has anyone got any thoughts on that? Just feel free to unmute yourselves and share.
Okay, I'm probably going to embarrass myself, but something to do with the native people that were originally in New Zealand?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. The Indigenous people, that's one branch of it. Well done, Terry. Anyone else got any thoughts?
Is that the Maori tribe?
Correct. Absolutely. Yep, great. Excellent. Well, you know something. That's wonderful. So look, there's 3 branches, the way I see it anyway. So we've got the music of the Māori, and we call it the music of the tangata whenua. And tangata whenua means the Indigenous people of the land. So that's a picture of somebody in traditional costume there on the screen. Then there's the influence of the Pacific. So New Zealand, as being a Pacific island, is surrounding New Zealand are a whole bunch of other Pacific islands as well. And a lot of Pasifika people come to live in New Zealand. So the Pacific culture is very prominent in our country. So, you know, music from the Cook Islands, Niuean, Samoan, Tokelauan, Tongan. In the education system in New Zealand, when you're reporting assessment, you report for Māori and also Pasifika students, and classroom teachers also have to specifically tailor teaching to the Māori and Pasifika students. So the Pasifika culture is very prominent. And lastly, we've had a big influence from the settlers. So the town or the city where I come from, Christchurch, is very British in origin. Right next to Christchurch is a lovely settlement called Aotearoa, and every street name is in French because that was initially a French settlement. And then further south you go, we have Dunedin, which is Scottish settlement. And actually, the further south you travel, the more Scottish the dialect sounds as well. So it's really interesting. So New Zealand's got so many inputs in terms of its folk music and its folk songs. So I'm going to start today by talking a little bit about the music of the Māori, or the tangata whenua. So I'm going to play you a piece of music called Te Mura o Te Ahi, which is by the Puanaki whānau. So the photo that you're seeing on the screen there is the Puanaki whānau. Now, whānau means family. So composers are the family of the Puanakis. So there, the lady on the left is called Whaia Tihi, and Whaia means respected elder woman. Then we've got Mātua Wiramu in the middle, Mātua meaning teacher. And then right on the right is Te Whaki, who is their son and does a lot of the composition. So I'm going to play you a piece in the kapahaka style. And this is a choir that I took. This was a concert about 6 months before I left to come over to the United States. So this was the New Zealand Secondary Students Choir, and I was very fortunate to be the conductor of that choir for 10 years. So here is a recording called Te Mura o Te Ahi. So what I'd love you to do is, while you're watching it, have a wee think about what some of the features might be in terms of the influence on the music. So I'll just play this for you. Here we go. Cool. So that's Te Mura o Te Ahi by the Puanaki whānau. So I was interested, what kind of features did you notice in the style or in how the music was put together or the performance was put together? Just feel free to unmute yourself and share.
Very driving.
Anyone brave enough to have?
Underlying beat was kind of like the driving beat was kind of like the underlying heartbeat that kept everybody together.
That is absolutely right, and that's got a special name called the takahia. So it's the right foot stamping the whole time. So yeah, hey, great observation. What else?
It reminds me of music that I heard before at Fiji, Samoa, a lot of foot stomping, triplets, shouting. It reminded me of the people who
Yep.
were climbing the tree in Samoa, tree climbers, and their
Oh,
groups, primitive people from those areas.
Sure. Yeah. So look, you've touched on some cool features already. So this particular piece is in what we call the kapahaka style. And this particular piece is called a waiata. Waiata meaning song. A ringa ringa. And the ringa ringa is the use of the hands. So it means action song. And you would have noticed right at the beginning that one of the students was making calls. And all those calls are commands and they mean certain things. And that helps to sort of bring a group together because there's no conductor. So the first one was kiraro, which means to put your hands by your side. And then they said kia wiri. So through the whole performance, you would have seen the hands moving like this. And that means to tremble. So when you're performing the actions, you're not allowed to stop that movement, because that if you stop that movement, that basically means there's no life in what you're doing or no life in you. So that's called a wiri. Hope means put your hands on your hips. Kia rite was said just before they started singing, which means be prepared. And then takahia was what the first person just mentioned, and that is to break it down or to put your foot down, which gives the tactus or the beat throughout the whole piece, that driving rhythm. So yeah, that really important kind of commands that happen in those pieces. You probably would have noticed that they used props. So there were feathers. And when I tell you the story, it'll probably click as to why they used feathers. They were red, orange, and white, which in this context symbolized the fire. In some Māori pieces, you'll see the use of other materials like poi. A poi is, these days, it's a flax rope, and on the end of the flax rope is like a ball, a white ball. In ancient times, that was a weapon, so it would have been stone or something and be used to sort of sling at someone. These days, they're not made out of stone, they're made out of cotton wool inside a shopping bag or some kind of white plastic. Rako, you'd often see some of the gentlemen, they would be using sticks, and they would have been weapons for war as well, like the guy in the picture is using. And then there's something called pukana, and I wondered if you'd noticed there were a few of the students doing what this gentleman here is doing. That's whitening of the eyes and the poking out of the tongue. And that's referred to as pukana, which is, it's like a challenge to someone while you're singing. So you did really well. All of the harmony that you're hearing is improvised. So what happens is we just learn a melody and then it's over to the students to improvise their harmony around the guitar chords. So what I love about that is that each performance is very unique, and you can change it up for yourself. What I used to do is ask a third of the choir to sing the melody so that the melody was never lost, but everybody else, they just improvise above those guitar chords. So which brings me on to the guitar, the use of the acoustic guitar. And there's a strum variations of this drum, which are often referred to as the Māori strum. So this one's dum ba dum bum ba 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 bum ba da ba 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 ba, and that goes through the whole way through the piece. And there are variations of that, but generally they're pretty much the same. The things that you can't sort of see, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the process in a minute as to how something you can get, you know, take something written by a family, such as the Puanakis, and put it on the stage. And one of the big things that is not seen in performance, but is more felt, is the wairua, or the spirit. And that's a very special thing with Māori music. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the process. So these three wonderful people here have become very, very good friends of mine. They live in the city that I live in, or lived in New Zealand. And, you know, taking the New Zealand Secondary Students Choir, which is our top choir for high school students, I wanted to do kabahaka music because it's a huge part of our culture. So what I did is I knew another conductor, and he said, I'll introduce you to this particular family. So I arranged a meeting with them, and we met over a coffee and just got to know each other. And I talked a little bit about my history with music and the things that I've done in the past in terms of singing in Māori and all that and those kinds of things. And they said, yeah, sure, we would love to be involved in some kind of project with your choir. So what that meant was that I then went to their ropu. Now, a ropu is a name for a group, and it would be a Māori concert party. So the three Puanaki people that you see here run a big Māori concert party. So I attended their rehearsal. And part of that process is getting welcomed into the ropu, or welcomed into the group, becoming part of the family. So I attended, they spoke to me in te reo Māori, and then I answered them back in English. Then they sang a song to me in Māori, and I had to sing a song back to them. And then at the end of the process, we hongi. Now, hongi is the name given to the pressing of noses. So what happens is that you come together, you press noses, and you share breath. And I did that with all of the group. So once that's done, and you've had something to eat, then you're regarded as part of the ropu, part of the family. And from that moment on, the relationship just flourished. So what I did was I said, right, I'd love to do this particular piece. So looking at Te Mura o Te Ahi, because we generally live in an environment where we read the music. I know for myself, I rely very much on reading the music in order to be able to sing it. I asked special permission to be able to transcribe the melody and the chords. And that was really just to speed the process up, because in the Māori tradition, it's not taught by reading, it's an oral tradition. So when the Puanakis are teaching their whānau and their ropu, they would teach through by ear, you know, just sing it to them, they'd sing a harmony part to them, they'd sing it back. But to speed the process up in the choir setting, I got special permission to transcribe it. And then I presented to the choir. So the first, most important thing is the actual sharing of the story. So Te Mura o Te Ahi is a Māori myth about a really mischievous youngster called Maui. And Maui put out all the fire in the world and nobody could cook and eat. So he went to see Mahuika, who is the fire goddess. And she had 5 flames on each of her fingernails. So she gave him the one off the thumb, and he took it away and put it out. So he went back and she gave him the second one. Then he went away and repeated the process. And then finally, when he went back for the 5th one, she was so frustrated with him that she threw it at him, and it started a massive fire in the trees. And the myth is that Maui put out all the fire in the world so people couldn't cook, and now the fire resides in the forest. So Yeah, so it's a myth about the formation of fire. So hence why you would have seen the feathers through that. And the text that they've also said is onomatopoeic of the flashing flames that are used. So once we've shared the story and the students have a really good sort of understanding about what they're going to be singing about, we learn and we memorize the reo being the language. So the Māori language is actually very straightforward. It's very much like Italian. There are only 5 vowel sounds, a, e, I, o, u. And there are only 10 consonants. I'm just going to move this part of the screen. Hang on. There are only 10 consonants. So the WH is pronounced as an F. So that would be F. Then NG as in sing. H, K, M, P, N, P, R, T, and W. So there are no B, C, D, F, J, K, Q, S, V, X, Y, and Z in the Māori alphabet. The T is done in a special way, and that is if it's before an A, an E, or an O, it's soft, so it'd be ta, te, to. And if it's before an E vowel or an U vowel, it's wet, so T2. So it'd be ta, te, to, T2. And then the last thing is generally we move on to the second vowel in diphthong. So for instance, in English, we tend to hold on to the first sound, but in Te Reo Māori, they go to the second sound. So a word like tau would be tau, not tau. So that's got quite a few implications in terms of when you're actually learning the reo, or the language. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read, say, a line of this text, and this is an opportunity for you to sort of parrot back. You can leave your mics off, but just to sort of get a bit of a geography for the text. So this is the first tiny little bit of the piece. So at the beginning, it's ko te mura, o te ahi, he atua, he tawhito, he tipua. And that would be haked. So it'd be ko te mura o te ahi, he atua, he tawhito, he tipua. So you would have noticed when they did it at the beginning, they chanted it, or they, what we would call haka it. And in that moment, it's very chest voice. And even the sopranos and altos are, ko te mura o te ahi, right up that part of their voice with that kind of strength. And then we get into the waiata, or the song. So I'll go through the text of this a little bit. Te mura o te ahi, pake pake ake ana. Paku paku ana, pi 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 ana, pu 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 ake ana. So in that little bit of text, you can see the flames. So paku, pake pake is the spitting of the fire, of the flames, as is the pi 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 and the pu pu pu. So all of that comes through the text as well as through the actions. So that's just the first tiny little bit of the text. And we get to the stage where this was completely memorized just through repetition, because when you add the actions, you kind of have to have it memorized first, or else it becomes a bit of a difficult scenario. So that's that part. And then I would teach the melody to the students, and spend a lot of time actually just learning the melody, making sure that that's really accurate. So let's have a wee go. So the first part of this, you just repeat after me. The first part's very easy because it's haked. So, ko te mura o te ahi, he atua, he tawhito, he tipua, and then we repeat that. So we go, ko te mura o te ahi, he atua, he tawhito, he tipua. Okay, and then the melody's really straightforward. Te mura o te ahi. Let's try that together. And 1. Te mura o te ahi. The next bit. Pake pake ake ana. 2 and 1. Pake pake ake ana. So let's put those 2 lines together. Te mu. Toru fa. Te mura o te ahi. Pake pake ake ana. the next bit's pretty much the same as what we've just sung. Paku paku ana. Paku paku ana. Next bit. Pi 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 ana. Pi 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 ana. Pu pu pu. Pu 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 ake ana. Great job. Let's try put all that together from where it says sun. So here's the note. Te mura toru fa. Te mura o te ahi, pake pake ake ana. Paku paku ana, pi 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 ana, pu 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 ake ana. So the process that I've just done with you, the exact same process that I would do to teach this in the choir or in the classroom. So once you've gone through the piece and you've learnt the melody, the next step is to experiment with improvising the harmony. So I would just simply play the chords and say, everybody, just have a go at trying something different. So they might go, Te mura o te ahi, pake pake ake ana. So just sort of switching it up. And there's no right or wrong. They can, as long as their harmony fits with the chords of the guitar, no problems. Okay, which makes it really quite exciting, and it's a good skill for the students to learn as well. By that stage, there's not much more that I can do, because I'm not a native Māori speaker, so I bring in the whānau. So the three people that in the picture I brought to our rehearsals, and they came in for a whole day with us. And what they did is they refined the reo. So they listened to what we'd done and made some suggestions. Then they'd spend quite a bit of time teaching the actions. But the most important thing that they can do that I can't do is to impart the wairua, or impart the spirit of the piece for the students. And that comes through the relationship, through the whole day of working with them, for how they break it down, how they scaffold it. And by the end of the day, there's a real spirit about what the piece is and what the piece means to the family, but also now what that means to the singers. And from that point, you've got, if you think of the piece as a work of art, you've got a treasure in front of you. This is a particular treasure that you now hold as a singer and as a group. That is the piece Te Mura o Te Ahi, and that's the treasure that you're offering out to the audience. One of the things that I was charged with too was when we went overseas, or during performances, that because obviously the family, they wouldn't come with us, is that I was then regarded as the kaitiaki, or the guardian of the performances, so that making sure that the standards were staying high, the language was staying correct, the actions were looking refined, all those kinds of things. And that's a responsibility that's really important, to make sure that the culture is being represented authentically. And then I thought it might be interesting to sort of put into context what I'm doing now, being not in New Zealand. So, like working in the United States, and I'm still doing kapahaka music with the choirs here at Westminster. And what that means, what my responsibilities are to be able to do that. And the biggest thing is to make sure that I go back to the whānau, go back to the Puanaki whānau, and keep them fully informed of what I'm doing, asking their permission, making sure that it's okay for me to be doing it. If I've got any questions about the piece, then they would, have some input into it. Long term, I think now that we've got the Zoom medium, having a Zoom session with the choir doing the actions and things while the Puanaki whānau are watching, to try and add the wairua to the spirit. And the students at Westminster have been really enjoying learning this and learning the process that goes into taking a piece from, or borrowing a piece from the whānau, and then putting it together in a choir in a context which is authentic and culturally appropriate. So, are there any questions about what I've talked about so far before I move on to the next bit?
So I have a question about you being the keeper of the music. How did they explain that responsibility to you?
It's a really good question. It's something that I learned a long time ago. It was actually before my started with the Puanaki whānau. When I used to sing in the New Zealand Youth Choir, we had a different whānau come in and work with us. And the conductor of the choir then would talk about that kind of relationship of being a kaitiaki, being sort of like a person who's sort of responsible for overseeing it. So it kind of just happens because you are the director of the group. But I know for sure that if my intentions weren't good, I would not be allowed to do this. So, and that's often what's said to me too, is that they know that I'm going to teach the language correctly. They know that I'm going to talk to them about our performances, going to involve them in the process. So that's the responsibility, making sure that, I'm not, I was given special permission to be able to transcribe it, but that stays just for a teaching purpose. It's not, I'm not going to go off and publish it and all those kinds of things. Do you know what I mean? So just taking that responsibility just really seriously, so that you're representing the composers and the music the best way possible. Yeah. Were there any other questions about the process? Great. Okay. So a lot of Māori music has been arranged. So it would have existed, like in a form which was not written down. And some composers in New Zealand and some arrangers have taken those Māori melodies and written them into a more Western context. But I want to play you an example of this, which is very authentic in the way that it's written or the way that it's been arranged. It incorporates a traditional Māori melody. It also incorporates a bit of haka. And this particular performance I'm going to show you was a performance of 700 high school students. So in New Zealand, because New Zealand's only 4.5 million people, we have one big kind of event every year called the Big Sing. And about 300 choirs, they apply and then they participate in a regional competition. And the top 24 choirs through the country then meet in one of our main cities, and they compete for gold, silver and bronze awards. And at the end of this particular competition, they all come together and sing a massed item. And so this was also last year's performance of Aotearoa, which translates as the cicada. So, and this is not the composer, but the arranger, Brent Stewart. And he's actually playing the piano in this performance. So here is Aotearoa. So that particular piece, they're actually doing it at the moment as a virtual choir thing for the schools in New Zealand, because all their choirs obviously not operating at the moment. They decided to do a massive virtual choir piece. So it's really interesting. I just thought of something while seeing through that. In New Zealand, classroom instruction is mostly delivered in English, but all students learn Te Reo Māori throughout their education. And when you go into the classrooms in New Zealand, you know how in younger classrooms you would see the names of things around the room written in English, like clock or door. So everything would be written bilingually. So it would be clock and karaka, meaning the clock, and all those kinds of things. So the students grow up with the Māori language from a very young age. So when you go and perform a piece of Māori music, a lot of them read it very much like English. So they're very used to singing in that language. Another piece I'm going to play you is a Māori lullaby by Princess Te Rangi Pai. If you want a copy of this, I've got a copy and I would just send it to you. So, you know, if you're interested. But this is a very famous Māori lullaby. And for a long time, when television used to finish at, say, 11 o'clock at night, we only had 2 television channels in New Zealand for a long time. They would close every night with this particular piece. So here is Hine e Hine, and Māori lullaby. Great, and that brings us to the next little bit of the folk tradition, and that is the music of Pasifika. So I'm going to share a piece by a young New Zealander called Stephen Rapana, and he used to arrange particular Samoan music for groups. And the piece that I'm going to play you is O Maia Soma e and Malie Tagifa. Now, or Maia Soma e, he wrote as he was traveling from New Zealand back to Samoa for his grandfather's funeral. And then Malie Tagifa is another kind of legend. It's about whales and sharks and those kinds of fish being, very valuable in the culture. So Malie is the shark and Tagifa is the whale. So while you watch this, you'll be able to see some hand actions through this, which mimic the fish. So here is O Maia Soma e and Malie Tagifa, which is part of the Samoan tradition. The Rapana and outer actions are the tail of the whale. you would have seen that in the choir it was very multicultural. So we'd have students from Samoa, we'd have Māori students, Tongan students, Asian students. So a full diverse choir, which was very special to work with. And in fact, the classrooms in New Zealand are very much the same. We have wonderful arranger living here in the United States, New Zealander Christopher Marshall, and he's written a lot of arrangements of Samoan folk songs. So one that's really popular, particularly in New Zealand, is Minoi Minoi. I'm not sure if you know it, but I'll just play half of it. And so that's kind of the second strand, which is music from Pasifika, and there's also Tongan music and music of the Cook Island Māori and all those kinds of things. And students in education and in music are educated in all these types of songs from a very early age. So then we've got the music of the settlers. So this particular piece is a Scottish piece. So it was written by a settler who immigrated from Scotland to New Zealand and resided in Dunedin, which is just south of where I lived. The interesting thing about it is it's written in English, but it's very hard to actually understand the text because it's very Scottish. So like there'll be a lot of words that are very much in the Scottish dialect. So this particular piece talks about the journey that this particular settler made from Scotland through to New Zealand. And there's a lot of music like this in existence in New Zealand, and it's very much the tradition of the settlers. So this is the last piece that I'm going to play today, and then I've got some time for any questions that you've got. So this is called Altered Days. So that sort of represents the music of the settlers. So I'll just stop sharing my screen and just, were there any questions about New Zealand folk music or anything to do with New Zealand that anyone's wondering?
There were a couple of questions asked in the chat box.
Sure, I can.
Okay, the first is similar to what, or I think means how Maori is being taught in the schools of New Zealand. In North Carolina, Cherokee is taught in the schools of the Eastern Band. It's the only way to keep the treasures. I guess that's not really a question as much as a recognition of a similarity.
It's very true, and that's why also the importance of sort of continuing to perform the Māori music, and also, you know, some of the people that have taken traditional Māori music and arranged it, but those who have been really authentic about how they've done that as well, you know, preserving the melody and all those kinds of things is a way to preserve the culture going forward. So yeah, that's great. There was a question about something to do with elementary, how children were learning in elementary with this. Is that right?
Yeah. Where would you start with elementary
Where would you start
school?
with elementary school? I remember when I was 5 years of age, and we would sit on the floor at new entrant level. We call it kindergarten here, right? But we called it new entrant anyway. And a lady would come in every week, and she'd spend half an hour with the class, and she'd bring her guitar, and she would just teach us songs. So like the first song that I learned in Māori was the colour song, and I just remember her having flashcards with it, and it was like, Ma is white, Whero is red, Kakariki green. So young children will learn songs that relate to what they're learning in the classroom. Like they're learning colours, they'll learn the Māori colour song, they'll learn how to count in Māori, and they'll learn how to greet in Māori. So that's what I'd be doing with young children. And there's a lot of resources on YouTube, actually, with songs to introduce at an elementary school level. They've got the lyrics, they've got the pronunciation, they've got the guitar backing with somebody actually singing, and there's quite a lot of stuff out there. So if you're interested with your elementary school children, that would be a great place to start. Just type into YouTube Māori colour song and it will come up, and it's yeah. But I have very fond memories of weekly Māori instruction at school.
Do you know if any Maori people have issues with the westernizing of their music, or since it is performed respectfully, is it accepted?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different views on that in New Zealand. I know that I can only speak for the relationship that I have with the Puanaki whānau, and they're very happy for me to be sharing their music, which is wonderful. And I think they're happy for me to be able to share it because they know that because they know me and they've got a personal relationship with me. They know that I'm going to share it authentically and share it respectfully, and talk about the importance of that kind of thing. So yeah, which is really fortunate because it just means it's part of, because I've grown up with this, it is, while I'm not Māori, I feel like it's very much part of me, having lived in bicultural New Zealand, growing up in bicultural New Zealand. So yeah.
Was the penultimate piece of music arranged Stephen Rapana in the neoclassical style based on choral progressions and harmonies?
Yes. Absolutely. So Stephen, so I didn't actually talk about how we put that piece on the stage, but a similar process that I followed with the Māori music. So I went to Stephen and said, Stephen, I'd love to do some Samoan folk songs with the choir. And he would go away and he would arrange it. So because he knew that the traditional music, and because he's also got a Bachelor of Music, so he would have done all those kind of harmony courses and things like that. His arrangements have been influenced in that way, and you can sort of hear the fusion of that with the traditional kind of Samoan colours and chants and things like that.
What arrangement or song do you suggest for middle school grades 7 and 8?
Tu tira mai ngā iwi.
Would you mind typing that into the
I will
chat
type
box?
it. I will do this because there is a wonderful track on YouTube and it's got the line. It's got all the text and the music. Tu tira mai ngā iwi. It's a very famous, I'll also type in another piece and I'm happy to send you an arrangement of this as well. It's called Pokare Kareana, which is also a very familiar New Zealand song. But Tu Tira Mai Ngā Iwi is a great song for children to sing. It's very straightforward. It's in G major. They'll love it. There's a little bit at the end where they do a little bit of chant in it. So very, very accessible. Other pieces that I can think, that last one, Hine is another popular song for children to sing as well. Just typing all those in for you. There you go. But they'll all they all come up on YouTube. And if you want to know a little bit about some of the myths and legends that I talked about, there's also little clips on that on YouTube as well. So it's a wonderful resource.
So you mentioned that you had provided Abby with some resources that she's going to hand out. Were these pieces on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are not Tu Tira Mai Ngā Iwi
Okay.
or Pokare Kareana, but everything that I've talked about tonight is in there along with who's composed it and their email addresses and everything. So, yeah.
Is your email on there as well in case people want to reach out like you offer? Great, thank you.
It is. Yep, my email's out there as well. So for people. Are there any other questions? Well, it's been a real privilege tonight. I've loved being able to share part of where I come from, with you tonight. And thank you for listening. And I hope to meet everybody in person at some stage. That'd be great.
Yeah,
I think we've
sure
enjoyed it just as much on this end.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm sure I can speak for everybody when it was our privilege to hear about all this, to expand what we know about tonight. It was thrilling for me anyway. So thank you very much.
My
Well, it's
pleasure.
refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
Have something new.
No problem. Anytime, seriously. Anytime.
Thank you again.
Okay. We'll see you.
Thanks, everyone.
All the best for the rest of the academic year too.
Yes, you too. Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye.